It was small, but it changed everything. The Walkman put sound to an entire generation and made music personal. From the streets of Tokyo to the beaches of California, it became an icon of freedom and style. It wasn't just a piece of electronics, it was the soundtrack to your life. The Walkman story is really the story of Sony, and Sony's story is about innovation under uncertainty. This wasn't about inventing something from scratch. Portable cassette players already existed. Sony had been making them for over a decade, from the chunky TC-100 of 1968 to the miniature TC-50 that went to the moon with Apollo astronauts. By the late 70s, Sony had two key products that would feed directly into the Walkman. The Pressman, a small, lightweight mono tape recorder beloved by journalists, and the TC-D5, a high-end stereo recorder used by audio enthusiasts. One of Sony's founders, Masaru Ibuka, loved taking the TC-D5 on long flights to listen to music. The sound quality was great, but it was far too heavy to carry everywhere. So Sony engineers took the Pressman, stripped out the recording parts, added a stereo amplifier, and created a pure playback machine. The Walkman idea was born. The other Sony founder, Akio Morita, saw its potential instantly. But here's the twist. There was no proven market for a product like this. People didn't walk around with headphones on. In fact, headphones were big, clunky, and often associated with telephone operators, or hearing loss. Morita believed in the Walkman so strongly, he staked his job on it. If it failed, he said, he'd resign. The first Walkman, the TPSL2, was blue and silver, had two headphone jacks so you could share music with a friend, and even a quirky hotline button. Press it, and your music dipped so you could talk without taking off your headphones. Technologically, it wasn't groundbreaking. The real engineering challenge wasn't the player, it was the headphones. Sony's MDR3L2s were revolutionary. Light, comfortable, and crystal clear. Weighing just 50 grams with rare earth magnets and a brand new mini jack connector, they set the industry standard. One designer said, "We wanted them so small and light you wouldn't even feel them. Everything we did, we were doing for the first time." On June 22, 1979, Sony launched the Walkman in Japan for 33,000 yen, aimed at college students. Instead of a dull press conference, they took reporters to a park, gave them Walkmans, and let them listen as staff skated and cycled around them. Sales started slow, but by the end of August, just 3 months later, all 30,000 initial units had sold out. The Walkman's journey didn't stop in Japan. A year later, in June 1980, it crossed the Pacific, but in the United States, Sony branded it the Soundabout. In the UK and across Europe, it appeared as the Stowaway. The names didn't stick. Very quickly, the world embraced the Japanese original. Walkman became the universal word for portable music. The Walkman made music personal. It turned listening into a private ritual. A teenager once said, "I have my own world. I hear it differently and feel stronger." The 1980s were the Walkman decade, and Sony delivered a new and better version of the Walkman every year. The WM2 from 1981 was barely bigger than a cassette. In 1982 came the first Walkman with auto reverse feature and a remote control. And I think we all know somebody who had this yellow beauty, the first waterproof sport Walkman from 1985. By the end of the decade, Sony had sold a staggering 50 million Walkman worldwide. It's safe to say that Akio Morita didn't have to quit his job. Instead, his vision had sparked a global phenomenon that led to its integration into the Oxford English Dictionary in 1986. Not everyone saw the Walkman as Sony's idea, though. German inventor Andreas Pavel claimed his stereo belt came first. After decades of legal battles, Sony paid him millions in 2004 to end the dispute. Through the 1980s and 90s, the Walkman kept selling strong. When cassettes started to fade in the late 80s, Sony adapted. First with portable CD players, the Discman, and later, in the mid-90s, with the mini disc. By then, Sony had helped put portable music into everyone's pockets. Sometimes it was an original Walkman. Other times, it was one of the countless imitators from brands like Aiwa, Toshiba, Panasonic, or Sharp. By 1999, Sony had sold more than 186 million Walkmans across all formats. But change was coming, and this time, Sony wasn't ready. The shift was digital. The internet, MP3 files, and file-sharing platforms like Napster transformed how people discovered, copied, and shared music. The world wanted MP3s, but Sony clung to its own proprietary format, a track 3, making life harder for consumers who just wanted simple, shareable music. Meanwhile, in Cupertino, Apple took a very different approach. They didn't care about formats. Instead, they promised 1,000 songs in your pocket. The iPod was small, it was stylish, and most importantly, it played MP3s. By the time Sony finally gave in and added MP3 support in the mid-2000s, it was too late. The Walkman had lost its crown. The iPod was the new king of portable music. It's hard to overstate what the Sony Walkman meant in the 1980s, not just as a gadget, but as a cultural earthquake. It even gave us the Walkman effect, sealing yourself inside your own personal soundtrack wherever you were. Today, that's second nature. In 1979, it was radical. The Walkman is gone, but its legacy lives in every pair of earbuds, every curated playlist, every step you take with music in your pocket. It wasn't just a gadget. It was a cultural shift. It proved music could be yours, anywhere, anytime. Thanks a ton for sticking around until the end. If you had fun, hit that like button to help spread the word, and don't forget to check out these other videos. See you soon.